Back in 1975, Kodak invented the world's first digital camera. And then they scrapped the idea. They killed it. They thought it was a bit heavy, processing times were a bit slow, resolution wasn't great, it's expensive, and it's probably going to kill our own business. One executive, in fact, said, cute idea, but don't tell anyone about it. And they ditched it. In 2007, their patent ran out. In 2012, they were bankrupt. They spent all their time looking at the challenges and the difficulties of digital photography, and they couldn't really get their head around a new business model and a new way of thinking. Now, digital product passports are coming, so you don't make the decision if you want to do this or not. If you're a brand, you're going to have to do it. There's exclusions. Obviously, we know about food, pharmaceuticals, animal feed. They're not involved. Everybody else is going to need to do this. And our message to you is really look at the opportunities. Yes, there are challenges, and you're going to have challenges to deal with, but also look at the opportunities. We've spent the last 12 months, myself and Borger, talking to brands right across the Nordic region and into Europe, and all of them have come back to us with different things, and some of them are a bit like Kodak. They're just looking at the challenges, and they don't want to do it. So I can quote somebody, but I can't say who it is, this morning who said, this is just a big pain in the ass. But there was others in the same room who see huge opportunities with digital product passports. There are things we can do with this that make it actually maybe commercially viable and interesting for you guys to use. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. I'm the guy on the right, Colin. Kolla is a DPP service provider, and you, Borger, are the guy on the left.
Yes, thank you, and welcome, and glad to see you here. Before we start, how many of you have heard about DPP, and how many of you have started to work with it in your enterprise? Could we please get some hands in the air? Oh, still some, good. So that's a good start. Anyway, let's get this one. Why are we talking about this today? Because we are at the dawn of product transparency. For decades, there has been a massive information gap between what the brands knows and what the actual consumers knows and see. So DPP is basically the strategic bridge between the two of them. And this isn't about labels, it's about gaining data advantage that allows you to prove your brand's value in a very crowded market. Digital product passports are presented as a regulatory framework, and as a pain in the ass, as you said, for some people. But this is actually misleading. They represent a structural shift towards machine-readable, verifiable products. When products become comparable at the data level, transparency increases, weak claims get exposed, and strong brands gain advantage. This closes the information gap between producers, retailers, regulators, and consumers. This is not about compliance cost. Many mistake it for it's only a compliance cost. This is about competitive positioning in a transparent market. Now turning over to something you might all know about. This is where did it start? And this is the roadmap from EU. And it all started with the EU Green Deal in 2019, where they had a very, very ambitious goal that EU should be net zero emission by 2050. It's still a long time. It's like 25 years to go, 24 years to go. But still, I think I really applaud EU for taking this stance and doing something about it. The only problem about the EU Green Deal is that it was an ambition and without telling how to get there. So it's very vague. And then in 2020, there was this circular economy action plan that became a little bit more constructive, and you understood a little bit more what they actually expected us to do, or businesses and companies. But finally, in 2024, we had the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, which is much more clearer. And in that regulation, the vehicle, in order to work towards net zero emission by 2050 is DPP. So it does play a very important role. And so basically EU has methodically moved from a circular strategy to enforceable product regulation. DPP is the operative mechanism of that transition. When market rules changes, advantages shifts. Early movers design for value. Late movers absorb cost. I think that's a very important thing. You should take this as an opportunity, not as a cost factor. And then, obviously, you might have seen this drawing before, but this is kind of the old way: take, make, use, dispose, and waste. And waste is a very, very big problem within the EU, that we waste too much. And the whole idea about DPP is that we move into a more circular economy. In order to recycle a lot more, you will still have waste, but much less is the whole idea. I think that's fantastic. It's fantastic for my grandchildren and my children's above. I mean, we produce far too much waste as it is in Europe. So this is a fantastic and very bold ambition that EU has made. But don't take my word for it. You will see there is a really large number of companies that need to adhere to DPP. I've been looking into numbers. Roughly 360,000 brands and manufacturers would need to look into what to do with DPP in the first wave. And into our own backyard in the Nordics, there's roughly 5,000 products. And then turning over to Sweden, we are now in Sweden, 2,500 manufacturers within clothing, textiles, and other areas as well would need to look into this. And happily, we had a breakfast this morning, and some really large brands in Sweden were thinking about it. They haven't cracked it yet, but they really were on it, and they understood that this is a great opportunity to increase revenue as well. This is not only a cost. Some of you might have remembered when we had ISO 9000 that was introduced into the market and all the work with it. And there was a lot of screaming and shouting that it was very unclear and how to do this. But now it's in place, and I think many applaud ISO 9000 in order to get to quality issues. So this is, you might say the same thing, it's a lot of uncertainty, but still we're moving in the right direction for this area. And then timing is everything. These are the deadlines in rough numbers, I might say. Batteries already have started, iron, steel, but textile and clothing is a big industry that will be hit by the regulation in 2027. And then you have 18 months in order to comply with the regulations. So they still have some time, but then again, large brands, they have long production cycles, so you need to start now really to get this going. And then furniture, electronics, 2029, paint and chemicals in 2030. So basically, I think you cannot retrofit under deadline pressure if you want commercial upside. So if some of your brands already started and you haven't started, I think it's about time to look into this. You can't just close your eyes and think this will happen.
So that's the background. Before we start looking at all the opportunities, because there are, and we keep saying that there are, and we're not telling you what they are yet, but we're going to talk also about the challenges, because there's quite a few challenges as well there. And as we've spoken now to brands, you know, right around Europe, and the number one challenge, or maybe it's not the number one, but it's certainly one of the biggest challenges that have come up. Sorry, we've gone too far there. It's just this one, is gathering reliable supply chain information. And that is, so you're a clothing manufacturer and you know, maybe you've got tier 1 information from your suppliers, but you're going to have to go to tier 2 and tier 3 and maybe tier 4, and then it starts becoming a headache. This is a lot of work, and it's hard work. And I think this is definitely one of the big challenges that's out there. I think also we don't know yet what the EU is going to require to start with. So we've even seen it's 2027 for clothing, but the EU has been a little bit vague on its timelines and setting things. So we'll see how fast they come out with that. But certainly this is a challenge, and it's something that you kind of have to get working with straight away. We do also advocate, though, like, do a pilot and work with what you've got now, with the information that you have now, so that at least you can start getting started and seeing where the gaps are, because then you can add on maybe that second tier or third tier. But we're in that situation where a lot of manufacturers don't have all that supply chain information. It's quite complicated, or furniture manufacturers that might have 40 or 50 different suppliers that are coming in, and they've got to gather all of that, and who are the suppliers. So I think this is certainly an issue. There's a big upside to this, and we saw this when we spoke to a bunch of brands already this morning. But the upside is also that obviously if you do have that kind of knowledge on your supply chain, then you can make a more efficient supply chain. You can start working with product development in a different way and understand how to make your products. So get that information, and it will give you an advantage, but we know the hurdle to get there is a big one. The other one, and I want to ask, maybe we can do a raise of hands, because of the brands that I've spoken to, this has been the biggest one. The EU doesn't really tell us exactly what they want yet. Is there anyone here who feels that this is the biggest challenge that's out there today? I'm glad to see somebody nodding there. Thank you. Thank you. It's because it's a bit of a nuisance for ourselves as well, both for PIM systems and DPP service providers. Well, there's good reason for it as well, because obviously different branches have very different preconditions. If you're paints and chemicals, for example, it's a very different situation than maybe to clothing or to furniture. And so how do you work with those? So I understand that there's obviously a lot of debate and discussion, but it's also perhaps the biggest challenge that's out there. And it's a challenge that obviously will get overcome, but it's holding brands back. In fact, we had one brand we spoke to recently who basically just said, we're waiting, we're not going to do anything until we get all the exact information. I don't think that's the best way to go. I think it's good to get started and at least start seeing where your data is and how do you manage it, and getting that out so that different stakeholders can see what's what. But this was certainly a challenge.
Right.
This is you.
Moving over to what I call the heavy lifting of product data, managing product data. It's not just enough to have data. It has to be interruptible. It can move across the supply chain. We're talking about ensuring verifiable, accurate data that can withstand a regulatory audit, which will come sooner or later. We don't talk about it, but it will come. Maybe in 5 years, 10 years time, you will get an audit if your passport is correct or not. So then it's better to do it properly when you start. So this is where your product information management strategy becomes your most important sustainable tool, in my view, at least. Most companies already have 70 to 80% of all the data that you actually need, but they're kind of hidden away in various number of systems. It could be ERP, it could be PLM system, it could be MES, it could be in your PIM system, it could be also be in your DAM system. Many think that DAM is only pictures, but it also does carry certifications as well. So, I mean, there are many places where all this information is scattered around in your IT architecture. So in order to get this connected is a big deal. So basically, DPP forces product data discipline, and that discipline improves margins and operational efficiency if you get it right.
Other technical challenges include, and we've had these discussions with a lot of brands, some are saying we want to get already down to item level digital product passports. So maybe you all know this, so if I'm preaching to the converted, but if we just spell it out in simple terms, batch level, I've made 20,000 sweatshirts in August of 2025, and I make another 20,000 now in March of 2026. So they're different batches, and that batch in August 2025 has one digital product passport for all 20,000, and then the next one in March then has another digital product passport because there's a new date on it. So there's a slight change, and maybe there's been a change in the manufacturing process. But then what happens if we decide that of all 20,000 we do now in March, that every single one has its own individual digital product passport? And this is doable today, and you'll talk to, there's others around who'll say they can do it, but actually can you do it when you've got maybe 30 million products, and then over a 10-year period that becomes 300 million products, and that's then it becomes a sort of vast amounts. And that final solution, not quite there yet, but we're working on it. But this is certainly a challenge there. What's interesting is that some of the brands are saying to us, we don't want to wait. We want to go straight to item level digital product passports because we see a lot of opportunities. So I will get to them, things like the second-hand market, for example, and understanding more about your product. So we have this challenge. Then the other one is also then, how do we add information into that digital product passport after it's left you and it's left the retailer? It's now in the hands of an individual, and how can we safely add information about the fact that I've now refurbished an item of furniture, or I've sold a leather jacket, or whatever it could be. And so we need to do that in a safe and verifiable way as well. So these are some of the challenges that have come up. There is a solutions there for them, but there's certainly ones that people are talking about.
But we have the final challenge as well.
Yeah, we do.
And we want to highlight this as well, internal alignment. And you can't solve the DPP challenge in the siloed sustainability department. You can't just sort of say, this is for the sustainability department, sort it out. It requires actually that the CEO, IT team, logistics, marketing, sales, and the whole organization is actually rowing in the same direction. So if your data team isn't talking to your design team, the passport will fail before it's even issued, in our view. So, and that's also, this morning we had a talk with some brands, and they said kind of the change management is the big thing, really, to get people onboarded internally. And this is not sort of sustainability department that fix it.
I can even add in there, I thought there was an interesting point that was made but from a very large Swedish brand this morning about the fact that actually maybe you don't have all your stakeholders involved from day one. You need to think about when to involve them along the route, because in my head originally I was thinking, you need to get IT and you need to get sustainability and market and brand and sales all together in the room from day one. But their view was, no, not necessarily. Get them in when it's time, but make sure that they're involved so that they know what's going on, and that's quite a complex sort of job in itself.
Yeah. So the pitch is cross-functional governance and change management is essential, and then for sustainability for credibility, IT for scalability, and commercial for monetization. So this is more than just sustainability. There is also a huge opportunity as we move along. But rowing in the same direction, I like this picture. Yeah. I think that kind of underscores what we think.
When it comes to the opportunities, what's also interesting is that we as a DPP service provider and even as a PIM system, we've seen certain opportunities, but brands aren't really talking about them. But brands have come back to us to say that we see these opportunities. And today we're talking about what the brands are saying. And I think, yeah, I'll grab that from you. The biggest one that we're seeing that brands are talking to us about is the second-hand market. And that's when we go back to that item level digital product passport. What's really interesting is that, yeah, the second-hand we know is growing. It's growing very fast, so 2 to 3 times faster than the first-hand market. There's consumer interest. It's a lot of Gen Z who are buying second-hand, but it's going up now in age as well. People are getting used to it. We have platforms like Vinted, and these sort of marketplaces make it very, very simple. But we also see then that brands now want to get in on this act because they're thinking, hang on a second, so Vinted is doing a great job, but what happens if we as a brand could also hold our own second-hand platform? And then what happens if my digital product passport, if I scan a code and I can decide I want to sell that, so that I make it a kind of a seamless process of selling. So quick example, we've done a little pilot case with the Swedish Scout Association. I met my wife on a scout camp 30 years ago, would you believe, outside of Värnamo. That's why I'm here in Sweden now. So there you go, and it's for that reason I got in touch with them. But the Scouts is interesting. They obviously, you have a Scout shirt, your son or daughter has one. At the end of the year, that Scout shirt is now, they've grown so damn fast. There are too many vitamins, I think, in the water or something, but they've grown a lot. They're too small for the shirt. And then they'd go to a Scout hall and sell that, to some other parent who'd come along. But now they don't have to. So now they have a second-hand platform, the Scouts, on the Scouts web shop today, for example, so that somebody in Sweden can decide, I need a size large for my daughter, or a size medium, or whatever it is, and then they'll say, I'd like to buy that, and the person who's selling it, seller sends to the buyer, but then the Scouts theoretically make a cut. They're not a profitable organization, or they're not a commercial organization, so they're not interested in this. They're interested in extending the lifetime of the product, as is the EU. But brands see the exact same thing. They're realizing, I can make money twice on the same product. And actually, the second time round, I can probably make as much money as I can on the first time round. And now we're changing to a circular economy when this happens. The business model is starting to change. So if we go back to that Kodak story, you know, they couldn't look at the change in the business model. And yes, this is a big jump maybe for a lot of brands thinking, do I want to actually start a second-hand platform? But several that we've spoken to see we can make money on this. This could be useful. And the digital product passport can be a catalyst for that change. So the second-hand market is already growing. But if everybody has a QR code on all their clothing, for example, and you scan that code, and you make it very easy for the seller. It's effectively like this. I scan my DPP. I say, click on the second-hand button. I describe what sort of condition that thing is in, or the product is in. And the rest of the DPP information then goes with it, and it goes up on a second-hand platform. Seller sends to the buyer, brand makes a cut. And suddenly, this is a good way of making money. So very interesting from a circular economy perspective, in line with what the EU wants to do with the net zero emissions target. And there we have something that's, you know, really quite interesting.
All right. Sustainable brands win out. The reason why I make this claim is that consumers are not looking just for a product anymore. They're looking for a product that has proof of impact. At least the younger kids, I'm sure, are looking for it. They want to see sustainability and impact of the product they buy. So when you use DPP to provide that proof, you aren't just complying with the law, you're building a brand that customers can finally trust. I'm not saying they don't trust you now, but they will trust you even more if you take this work really seriously. So DPP turns sustainability from messaging into proof, and proof builds pricing power. But don't take my word for it. If we look into what BCG Group and the Harvard Business Review has said about sustainability, they claim that the brand value increases by 10%. Brand loyalty can be up to roughly 25% by doing the right thing. And then I think most staggering is basically the customer retention, that it can increase by 9 times if you do this properly and you really show the consumers the proof of your sustainability and impact into the environment.
We have a kind of an example here, because this is Thirst, and they sell a craft soda. They don't have to do a digital product passport, and so they don't have all the necessarily EU compliant information, but they want to tell their story, because actually they do a really tasty soda, and it's over at our stand at H30. Have a drink afterwards if you want. They'll be happily give you away some of their flavors. But what was interesting with the lemon one, for example, the only ingredients in their lemon is water, sugar, and lemon. That's it. And so they have a story to tell about the fact that we're just using real ingredients. This is sustainable for real. And so they wanted to put a QR code on their bottles, basically to tell that story. So not a DPP per se if we have sustainability directors out there saying, hang on a second, what about the compliance and CO2 emissions and all the rest? But I think it's an interesting mindset, because here's a company that doesn't actually have to do one, but is seeing that DPPs are coming and is seeing that actually we'd like to tell our story in a good way. They're also interested in the fact that they can reduce the amount of text on the bottle, because space on the packaging is an issue. And now if we can take people from a physical product to a digital experience, then we're onto something new. So you're more than welcome to scan the QR code and have a test, or come by H30 and test it as well. But just a bit of an interesting, I think, example for a company that doesn't actually have to do this, but is doing something similar anyway, and trying to tell their sustainability story. And they're a nice bunch of lads. Their managing director is also an Irishman, so he's obviously...
Then it must be nice.
Must be.
And then, I mean, we need to talk about agentic commerce. I'm sure you heard a lot about agentic commerce in the past 2 days. But, I mean, I think in the years to come, customers won't be browsing websites as they do right now. They will be using AI agents. I'm sure you heard many things and pitches about it. But the funny thing is that these agents, they need to have reliable, verifiable product data. And that's where it comes into play, having a DPP. So the DPP will be a great source for making sure that the agents find your product. And given that agents, they don't care really about brand, they care only about data and like comparing with other products, so then the data becomes even more important for the agents and how you want to stand out. So you might say that you can pause to do DPP, but I think that's a mistake. You should think, how can we use DPP? This will be a fantastic source for agentic commerce in the years to come.
Yep. One other one, and I'll go through it fairly quickly, is just repair and renovation. We've spoken to some furniture companies who have this as a part of their business model already, renovating. These guys, Quergreens, they do this Carl Malmsteen furniture. And this furniture, and again, this is also a sort of DPP, because it's the same thing. They want to put a QR code on their furniture straight away because they see that there's a renovation business for them. They want to make it easy for a consumer basically to click on that and know where to go if they want to reupholster some of their furniture. So they're a 5th generation company. Kind of interesting that Håkan, who's the owner there, he'll tell you that sometimes he can see in a piece of furniture that comes in and he knows that his grandfather had made that. So it's that's something that's really lasting, and they're able to extend the lifetime of a product. So there's something kind of nice about that as well. So also, I mean, an interesting opportunity for those who are looking along those parts. It's the same thing also with aftermarket or spare parts. These kind of businesses, you could lock into a DPP as well and start generating income, in that respect, which also extends the lifetime of products. Another one there is also just simply information when you need it. So by law, there is the DPP, but obviously when you have a platform to show a digital product passport, then you've got this kind of carrier of information. And this is where you can add in more information, and the EU would like to see this as well. So, user manuals, safety instructions, all that kind of information about a product that you're not really interested in as a consumer until that day that you suddenly are. How does that thing actually work? Or what model fridge do I have? Or where can I get a spare part because something's broken down? For the paints example, for example, was just simply, how much paint do I need? I've got a 20 square meter, bedroom, and I'm in the store and I scan it, and maybe I can go straight to a platform that also gives me all the DPP information, but maybe adds other relevant content to me at that particular time. So giving me relevant content when I need it, right in the store. So we see these are sort of opportunities that we should be thinking about beyond the actual EU compliance information that needs to be there. And when we do this, then DPP, well, we're kind of bandying the word around maybe too much, but we're also showing that there's a lot of new opportunities when there's a QR code on every product.
All right. This slide is maybe a little bit busy, but I think it really explains how kind of you can enrich your data. You start with the sourcing and manufacturing data, and then you add the design data from a PLM, MDM, ERP, and other systems. You have then your product information and product information management strategy, where you can kind of you move up high up on the ladder, and then you have warehouse logistics. Finally, you will get everything sorted and collected together from your DPP service provider. That's another area that we can spend a
long time
talking about. That will be more clear in July this year, when the EU actually will give us the requirements for how you can become a DPP service provider. And then, of course, you have the after sales. But at least at Bluestone, we've been discussing a lot. To what granularity should the DPP be at? Because that's not entirely clear by the EU yet. Like, should it be model and SKU? Should it be in batches? And should it be on individual ID? And I think individual ID does make sense if you have very, very expensive items you sell. It could be jewelry, it could be watches, and watches already, very expensive watches already have an ID. So that's kind of talked for. But I don't really think that EU will take this to the extreme and probably be pragmatic in order to get DPP going, that they will not be as harsh as we might think. Yeah. It would be less complicated initially, and then they might step up 1, 2, 3 times. And then, this might sound a little bit sort of basic, but I think having a get-in number on all your products is a very, very good start, because you need to have a unique product identifier. Many of the textile companies do have it, but many don't have a get-in number. So I think having a unique number is very important in order to have the passport.
Now, we have a big countdown right in front of us here that tells us that we've got 1 minute to go. So we're going to go really fast, Borger. Are you ready? All right.
I'm ready.
The path to DPP, this is our suggestion as to how you go about it. So we'll go quick. Number 1, gather the team, get all those stakeholders involved, as we've mentioned, and start understanding the needs, the different needs of the different stakeholders. Who needs what and when? Over to you, sir.
Where's the data? Find the gaps. I mean, you do have it in different systems. You need to find it and then fill the gaps. manage the data, and then look for opportunities.
Sounds good. And when you've got that done, then let's start doing a pilot or a prototype. And in fact, the brands we spoke to this morning, they get a lot of value. The ones that have done this, and you probably know them because they're quite well known, but the ones that have done pilots say this has been really helpful for us because it gets all the stakeholders also involved when you can actually see something at the end. So follow it through, create a prototype, do a pilot, and this actually will really help you get started. And it'll also help you see what you do have and what you don't have.
Scaling the project, and not a pilot, but then take it to the whole product line, and then follow developments. Follow developments within the EU. It is a lot of changes happening there. And
now they tell us that we're over time. We just did it in a minute.
Yeah.
That's us. You can scan those if you want. We have another one as well, the next slide, which basically just, if you want to download the presentation, scan that code and you can get the presentation sent to you. You're more than welcome to drop by. Ourselves at Kolla, we're at H30. Where are you at Bluestone?
F26.
F26, or just chat to us
and
afterwards.
I'll be here as well, so please come and talk to us.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.